Welcome to A Point for Reflection for Tuesday the 4th of August 2020. I think it was Muhammad Ali who used to declare he was the greatest. We generally seem a bit obsessed with something or someone being the best or the greatest. All sorts of television programs count down the best of, whether that is some singer's greatest songs, or the best comedy duos, or action movies, or whatever it is. A song that peaks at number 2 in the charts is seen as a flop, and it is often thought that the runners-up are never remembered. Yet in 2009, Susan Boyle only came second in Britain's Got Talent. Ollie Murs has made a successful career in music and television presenting, but only came second in X Factor, and One Direction only came third in their X Factor year. I wonder if we could remember between us who won those particular competitions. Even some of Jesus' disciples argued about who was the greatest. We all have different tastes and preferences, so there will always be different genres of music or film, different sports and activities, hobbies and interests. It isn't necessarily that one is better than the other, it is just our tastes differ. And in many ways, this is quite a trivial thing. Even if in the run-up to the end of the football season it seems like a matter of life or death if your particular team are not champions. It is a good media tool to create interest and generate revenue when an informal competition is made. I remember distinctly the publicity surrounding the music chart battle between Blur and Oasis, and although I was glad Blur won that particular round, the whole Britpop issue could be seen as trivial, or one that also highlighted divisions in our society, the North-South divide. Oasis were from Manchester and Blur were from the South. We can create a problem when we apply these credentials to people. There will always be some people we warm to more than others, but even those we don't warm to are someone else's favourite. But what happens when that becomes a reality within a family? I remember talking to a quite elderly lady at Mount Pleasant who stated how she had been a disappointment to her father because she had been born a girl. She lived with that disappointment her whole life. According to a survey in 2018, 1 in 5 parents admit to having a favourite child, sometimes for irrational reasons like which gender they are, and instead of valuing the individuals, we put value on achievements, whether a child went to university or not, whether a child got a first or not. Sometimes we see one child as more like me, and that can make us treat them as a favourite. The psychologists seem to advocate that this feeling of favouritism is only a problem when it is acted upon. It can be a problem for the favourite child, who cannot live up to the expectations, and the non-favourite child, who can often have self-esteem issues well into adulthood. This is not a modern issue, and one of the most well-known stories from the Hebrew Scriptures relates a story of a family dysfunction over generations, and the story we hear today continues that dysfunction by favoritism. Our reading comes from Genesis chapter 37, verses 1 to 28. Jacob settled in the land where his father had lived as an alien, the land of Canaan. This is the story of the family of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was shepherding the flock with his brothers. He was a helper to the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any other of his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he had made him a long robe with sleeves. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him, and could not speak peaceably to him. Once Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream that I dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field. Suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright. Then your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf." His brothers said to him, "Are you indeed to reign over us? Are you indeed to have dominion over us?" So they hated him even more, because of his dreams and his words. He had another dream and told it to his brothers, saying, "Look, I have had another dream. The sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." But when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, "What kind of dream is this that you have had? Shall we indeed come, I and your mother and your brothers, and bow to the ground before you?" So his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Now his brothers went to pasture their father's flock near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." He answered, "Here I am." So he said to him, "Go now, see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring word back to me." So he sent him from the valley of Hebron. He came to Shechem, and a man found him wandering in the fields. The man asked him, "What are you seeking?" "I am seeking my brothers," he said. "Tell me, please, where they are pasturing the flock." The man said, "They have gone away, for I heard them say, 'Let us go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. They saw him from a distance, and before he came near to them, they conspired to kill him. They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we shall say that a wild animal has devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams." Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood. Throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but lay no hand on him, that he might rescue him out of their hand and restore him to his father." So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the long robe with sleeves that he wore, and they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty, there was no water in it. Then they sat down to eat, and looking up they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels carrying gum, balm, and resin, on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and not lay our hands on him, for he is our brother, our own flesh." And his brothers agreed. When some Midianite traders passed by, they drew Joseph up, lifting him out of the pit, and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they took Joseph to Egypt. Even thousands of years ago, as communities told their stories around their campfires, like this one about Joseph, the difficulties of family life are expressed. Even though we tell these stories as though these ancient fathers of the faith are to be revered and unquestioned, like some kind of hero figure, these characters are portrayed with all their flaws and mistakes. I wonder if these stories were told more as a warning than a way to emulate. In reality, Joseph comes across as an arrogant young man, oblivious to the effect he is having on the people around him. Perhaps he genuinely couldn't see the damage being done and the rivalry caused by Jacob's favoritism of him. Most of his brothers, though not all, were fed up with him. His dreams certainly don't help the situation. Much of the resentment is caused by Jacob's favoritism. Though we are not told how Jacob says the words when he reacts to Joseph's dreams, only that it is a rebuke. Whether Jacob took it seriously or not, whether he was full of consternation or saw it as something more of a joke. I remember hearing the theologian Robert Beckford speak, and he said that he had taken the story of Joseph and used it as a study in a prison. When it came to the part where Joseph was wrongly put in prison in Egypt and the way he behaved in prison, the inmates, looking at this behavior, described Joseph as a snitch. I suspect Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice have helped us miss some of the nuances of this story, and in some ways Joseph is vindicated by the fact that he becomes a leader in Egypt, when in the end he is able to repay his family with kindness and forgiveness. Though I wonder how Jacob reacted when he discovered his favoured child was still alive. Joseph is treated as the hero of the story, and the one who suffers great injustices, and although that is true, some of the antagonism is caused by Joseph. It seems to come back to the issue of equality, how we are treated and how we treat one another. Within the context of a family, it can have a devastating effect when one parent cannot love all their children unconditionally. Equally, there has been great pain caused when parents have cut off children because of all sorts of issues, such as drugs or broken trust. Within our society, we have been made more aware of the prejudice and discrimination that has built much of our Western culture, and there is still huge issues around race, gender and sexuality that make our society less equal. When a particularly loud voice dictates a norm but is devoid of love, it creates a fractured society, particularly if you are the one who doesn't meet that norm. In the first letter of John we are told, "Dear friends, let us love one another, because love is from God. Everyone who loves is a child of God and knows God. God is love, and those who live in love live in God, and God lives in them." From chapter 4, verses 7 and 16. That suggests that love is not about feelings or emotion, but a choice. We choose to love, to be loving people, to love others, regardless of how we feel. So we have to ask of ourselves, is this a loving response? Equally, love does not judge, and we are not to judge either. For if it is love, then God is already present. In reality, neither Jacob nor Joseph's brothers were responding in love, and Jacob's attitude toward Joseph was not loving. Joseph seems to enjoy the adoration, which is equally not a loving response. God is not actually referred to in this story as we have heard it, but perhaps these stories tell us that God is able to transform even the most broken situation. Not that God caused the scenario, but God used it. Even out of great dysfunction, God's loving purpose could be realized. When the brothers are eventually reunited, the old hatreds and antagonisms seems to be forgotten. In the most dire situation, healing is possible. Perhaps that is why the Apostle Paul, who used to be a Pharisee and a persecutor of the early church, after his conversion to the way of Jesus, sees love as the greatest way. See 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 13. Loving God, when we seem to have no love left to give, fill us afresh. When all we do seems to cause hurt, fill us with peace. When we allow hatred to damage ourselves and others, fill us with healing. When we take out on others our need for approval, fill us with hope. Give us what we need, that your kingdom of love, acceptance, healing and joy may be made a reality. Amen.